It's time for a little comedy, a little content, and a lot of conversation. It's the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube. And now here's your host, Geno Jones.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is if you're watching me live. It is time for the Geno Jones Show, my daily variety show. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day holiday weekend, even though Memorial Day is the day that we should remember and honor the men and women who died fighting for this country, especially, let's just be honest about it, the men and women, the black men and women who went to foreign lands, like my grandfather, who fought in World War I, who came back and didn't have the freedoms in his own country. His own country didn't provide him the same freedoms that he went thousands of miles and went over and fought in foreign lands for freedom for people in a foreign land, freedoms he did not even have in his own country. Freedoms that the uniform that he wore, that country's uniform, denied him the same freedom that he fought for foreigners in a foreign land. I just had to make that point because there are many of our ancestors, African-American ancestors, men and women, who found themselves in that situation. But I honor the memory of all the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice and lost their lives in the cause of, as they say, freedom. And we're gonna have a conversation about freedom and how free freedom really is. Like, share, and subscribe. Please, like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe to the Geno Jones Show. It is fire. As a matter of fact, if you missed Friday's episode, shame on you. Ladies and gentlemen, it was fire. Today the heat is just gonna be just as hot. So once again, like, share, and subscribe to the Geno Jones YouTube channel, the Geno Jones Show. If you'd like to be an advertiser, I'd be honored to have you as an advertiser. If you'd like to be a sponsor, I'd love to have you as a sponsor. If you need the ultimate pitch man for your business, your goods, your service, your product, your business, I am not the king. I am the king. I am the king of pitchman. Holla at your boy. I'll give you all the contact information after the show. All right. Also, let me just, a heads up. I want to shout out Naomi Osaka. Tomorrow I'm going to really take a deep dive into it. This talented young lady, her dad is Haitian, a Haitian background. She was raised in New York primarily with her grandmother. Her mother is from Japan. So she's African-American and Asian descendant, but she truly embraces her African heritage and her culture. She didn't deny her Japanese culture, but she fully embraces. And when you see her, she can't help but embrace it because she's a black woman. You just look at it. This is America. So there's been a lot of talk about Naomi Osaka. She's probably the top ranked, or number two. She's right near the top, if not number one, number two, depending on the ranking. Tennis player in the world. She was the highest paid female athlete in 2020. More money than Serena, more money. You named a female athlete. She made like $52 million, I think $52.5 million last year. Well, basically, she's been dealing with depression since 2018. She also deals with social anxiety disorder. She's been very open about that. And she didn't want to talk to the media after the matches. So the people that run the French Open, when Roland Garros, basically said, look, if you don't talk to the media, we're going to fine you $15,000 every time you don't talk to them. She's like, tell you what, I got my self-care, my mental health is more important. Y'all can have the 15 grand. As a matter of fact, I'm not even worried about the what $1 or $2 million that she would have won had she won the French Open. She said, I'm good. Hold on to that. Hold on to that. Hold on to that 15 grand. Hold on to your microphone, because right now I need to take care of myself. She's dealing with, obviously, some level of depression and anxiety. And I commend her. I think it took a lot of strength. She's gotten support, but she's had some people to take shots at her. So we're going to go into detail. I will have a mental health expert on the show tomorrow, and I'm working on getting on a woman athlete who played at a very high level. So tomorrow's show you don't want to miss. Let's get into today. There are a lot of documentaries that was on over the weekend. So when we left off Friday, we talked about the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called Black Wall Street. You had over 300 black-owned businesses, everything from one of the top hotels on the planet to you had movie theaters, you had all kind of restaurants and clothing stores and shoe shine shops and restaurants and banks and schools and about 24 churches. Everything and anything that you could imagine was in this section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, called the Greenwood section, AKA, it was Booker T. Washington, I believe, gave it the name Negro Wall Street. Then it eventually evolved from Negro Wall Street to Black Wall Street. Well, those 300 businesses were destroyed, completely destroyed. 35 blocks destroyed. 35 blocks destroyed. Over 300 people, black people, were killed. You had 10,000 people who lived in that neighborhood. 1,256 homes were destroyed. The damage in today's dollar, the amount of damage in terms of property loss, homes that were completely burnt down, that were bombed, churches, businesses, would total somewhere today between $25 to $30 million. At the time, back in 1921, $2 million, which in today's dollar would be, like I said, nearly somewhere between 25 and $30 million. So once again, my guest today, we're bringing him back for a repeat performance because, oh man, he brought the heat. I mean, he brought the fire. I ain't gonna say the Lucifer fire because it was a good fire. Professor Damon Fordham, he is the professor of history at Charleston Southern University, and I am also honored to have Dr. Tamara Butler. She is Dr. Butler is the creative director for the Avery Research Center of African American History, and she is also the associate dean African American History and Culture. Let me get that right, and the associate dean at the College of Charleston Library. So, without any further ado, I've been waiting all weekend to have this show. As you see on camera, Dr. Butler, Professor Fordham, thank you both. Welcome. Let me start off. So Professor Fordham, since you started off this party with me, Dr. Butler, you could chime in. My monologue, my lead in, was I off with anything, or was I somewhat accurate in terms of just kind of the overall description of what happened?
It was accurate because, and incidentally, I definitely have to give a shout out to the Avery Research Center as being a great place of access for local African American history. I worked there from 1995 till 2007, as a matter of fact, as a research assistant. So my roots are in. I'm happy to see Dr. Butler here today to further represent that jewel within our midst for people who really want to get to the true facts of this information.
So let's pick up from where we left off, I should say, Professor Fordham. And where do you want to start? And Dr. Butler, you can chime in because later in the show, guys, you may have seen the show Watchmen with Regina King, who is one of the brilliant, not just an actress or an actor, but as a director. I loved Watchmen. Or you may have seen, what is the Dr. Butler, what is the other show?
Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft Country. So you can tell I haven't watched it. I've heard a lot about it. So I'm excited that Dr. Butler is going to kind of talk about the through line from, because basically both of these shows depict, I know at the very beginning, the very first episode, I don't know about the other one, but I know in terms of Watchmen, the initial episode, it's centered around the Tulsa Race Massacre. So, Professor Fordham, let's pick up where we left off on Friday and take it. You got the baton. Let's take it to the next step.
All right. Now, very briefly, for those of you who missed Friday's episode, here's the story thus far. On May the 31st, 1921, an young African-American man named Dick Rowland went into the Drexler building in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the elevator door opened, and a young white lady named Sarah Page ran out screaming, and the papers had all this stuff about him supposedly scratching her skin and assaulting her and such. And so the police arrested Dick Rowland. So while this is happening, the paper has this inflammatory headline that says "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator," and this gets the white population all stirred up, and they've been drinking all day and such. So they went down to the jail to try to lynch Dick Rowland. Meanwhile, a group of African American World War I veterans, led by a man named Obie Mann, a gentleman who lived up to his last name, led a posse of African American World War I veterans armed to the teeth to stop these men from lynching Dick Rowland. So at one point, the two groups confront each other. A white man goes up to Obie Mann and says, "Excuse me, nigga, what you gonna do with that gun?" And Obie Mann said, "I'm gonna use it, perhaps on you." And so this leads to the confrontation that leads to a shootout. But then the African Americans get the worst in the shootout, and some of them retreat back to Greenwood, while another World War I veteran named Peg Leg Taylor goes up on this hill and starts shooting them off before some of them get into Greenwood. But unfortunately, they get outnumbered and outgunned, and Sheriff William McCullough, white sheriff, makes a fatal mistake. He deputizes white Tulsans to put down this riot, but the white Tulsans are not on the side of the blacks. So they go on a rampage throughout the African American community, burning down homes, burning down businesses, etc., and so forth. There are numerous horror stories of old people getting killed in the streets, children being burned out of their homes, and so forth, and even of airplanes throwing down gas bombs and such. Enough documented evidence of that exists to where it is a feasible thing that probably did happen. And so then Sheriff McCullough started rounding these black people up and putting them in the convention center for their own safety, but yet nothing is done with the whites in any of this. So essentially they're eventually let out after they have to have IDs around their necks, and white people, and like, for example, the black maids and butlers, white people come to rescue them and so forth, as well as the White Red Cross. They do a few things here and there to help people and such, but they wait too late to call the National Guard. And by the time the National Guard gets there, it's all too late. That is the story thus far. So now let's go to part 2 of this.
Okay, but now let me just forward, because there's some questions that some of the viewers may just have. So I think one that's important, because you and I talked about this, the sheriff deputizing these white rioters. Now,
Correct.
Just on his face, I'm just saying, okay, this had to be intentional, because this dude could not have thought that these racist white folks was going to protect these black folks.
Well, in all honesty, according to the accounts that I have read, you see, this Sheriff William McCullough, he had a black policeman named Barney Cleaver at this point. And there was another one, too, whose name escapes me at this point. And the evidence suggests that, I can't say what was in that man's heart. I'm not about to get up here and do all of that. But his actions and deeds basically suggest a man who grossly underestimated that situation and how bad it was going to be. But in either case, though, he basically just messed up. That's the bottom line in this. And he and the mayor waited too late to call the National Guard into all of this.
So let me just stop you there, Professor Fordham, because I don't know. Now, listen, 1921, it might have been different, but I know today that mayors don't have power over local National Guards. But I can't imagine that the mayor was not in conversation with the governor, because...
Well, he had to call the governor, of course.
Right. So the governor would have been... So I just can't imagine all this is going on, and the governor knows that it's going on, and the governor just kind of takes his own sweet time to basically send a National Guard.
Yes, that is correct.
So let me just say this. Since it's my show, I can say this. This is not Professor Fordham. Like he said, he can't really see what's in a man's heart. But I can see what's in your heart by your actions and your behavior. Your actions and your behavior tells me your mouth don't, because your mouth could lie and say anything.
Oh, I understand that.
Oh no, I'm not somebody. I'm just saying. But your actions and behavior will always. That's the tell. It will always tell somebody what's truly in your heart. So I'll let you pick up from there because a lot of people watched the episode and I got a lot of positive feedback. They loved the job that you did, but there was a lot of conversation like this wasn't accidental. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys saw President Biden today. He spoke on it. He talked about an incident. There are three living survivors,
Correct.
African American, of the Tulsa race massacre, still living. And President Biden spoke to them, and they talked about how there was one black man that they tied to the back of a truck and drug him, and his head was bouncing off the asphalt.
Yes, all that's true.
Kind of like what happened with James Byrd in Texas.
Right.
And there was one family they were shot in the back of the head and kind of had them hanging over the fence. Just inhumane stuff. Just inhumane. So I didn't know if either one of you all saw.
No, I was at work all day, so I didn't see any of that.
No,
Dr. Butler, you didn't get to see it?
No, I
president's
didn't
remarks?
see it either. I mean, I think even though we talk about intention, I mean, there's something about violence, there's something about trauma. There's just a lot there. And I think there's one way to think about like the mass killing of Black people as a statement, because that was one of the commentaries, just like, oh, this is about to start something, with the kind of the desire of this mob to want to kill this young man, right? And who comes off the elevator, this whole desire. And so it's like, we've seen it happen over and over again. Right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
We see it constantly. And I think the question is just like, what do you do with what kind of message are you trying to send when you decide to do like execution style, the kind of brutal murder of Black people? We've seen it. People write about it. I mean, we talked about slavery. Vincent Brown writes about it and talks about like how you use it to make an example out of like what not to do. If you do this, we will murder you in this way and put you on public display. So, I mean, I think it leaves a lot. We could say, people do what they do, but I think there's something really key in the kind of brutal ways that people were murdered, and things were destroyed also. So that's just something I've been thinking about too. What kind of commentary is that for people?
Thank you for that feedback, Dr. Butler. Now, just caveat, and Professor Fordham, this will help you segue in. I trust your research. Not that I don't trust LeBron and Maverick as executive producers or Russell Westbrook, but I trust your research. So I heard over the weekend, after watching a lot of these documentaries, there was some speculation because they were kids. Dick Rowland and the white young lady, Sarah Page. Dick Rowland, or as they called him, Diamond Dick, was 19, right, and Sarah Page was 17.
Correct.
And there was some conversation that they were romantically linked, and that he didn't bump into her, but they were actually kissing, and that they were going to get married. And I guess maybe a white person saw it, and she panicked and was like, "Oh no, he didn't. He was trying to rape me," because we know that's happened. Well, yeah, that is part of America's history also.
I've heard that, but I haven't seen I've heard that in talking to people about the subject. I mean, there's not hard documentation that I have seen on that, but that does not mean that I could rule that out as a possibility.
Okay.
But now you also have to keep in mind, too, that a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old in 1921 was considered more of an adult than they are today.
Yes.
They don't have the delayed adolescence. They didn't have the delayed adolescence that we do today. But anyway, with all that being said and done, as far as intent and the sheriff and all of that, again, that's not really the thing that I'm concerned about here. What I'm concerned about in particular is because we all know that the newspaper put that story in there. And of course, they fed this narrative that the Greenwood area, which they refer to as Little Africa, was this den of iniquity and that it needed to be cleaned out. Okay. And, this was all shorthand for a cooked up reason to destroy the neighborhood. We get all of that. But anyway, the response to this is what I think is important, in that I mentioned last week this lady by the name of Mary Jones Parrish,
Yes.
who took the time to interview the survivors of the Tulsa massacre. And she was a survivor herself who escaped with her young daughter. And when the Tulsa newspapers were putting out this narrative of how it was all the fault of these quote unquote bad Negroes and the white community was acting in self defense, she was the one who wrote the book in 1922, Events of the Tulsa Massacre, the Tulsa disaster, that pretty much set the record straight on what was really going on, as well as black newspapermen throughout Oklahoma and Texas. They put the truth out there as to what really happened. But then one of the even better stories about that involves this man named Buck Colbert Franklin, B.C. Franklin. It was B.C. Franklin working out of tents after the Tulsa massacre who went to the mayor of Tulsa tried to take the land that was destroyed in Deep Greenwood and sell it to developers and other white people. But Buck Franklin, the lawyer, B.C. Franklin, took these people to court and won. And that is what saved the land of these black people. And so, you know, all this garbage about black people can't get together and all that. Guess what? Black people from around the country, NAACP, Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Association, Improvement Association, Cyril Briggs, African Blood Brotherhood, and all the rest, these black organizations raised money so that these black Tulsans could rebuild their community. And the community was rebuilt to such an extent that the great Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, co-founder of the NAACP, visited Tulsa in 1926, and he literally told the black people of Tulsa, Tulsa, I bow my head to you.
Wow. And I think, let me just jump in here. I think this is so important. Professor Fordham and Dr. Butler, you can comment on this. Because Professor Fordham, when you talked about how black Tulsans were placed in like the convention center, let's be straight about it. They were placed in internment camps.
Yes,
and
that's true.
These tent cities.
Correct.
Many of the residents were in these tent cities for like 6 months.
That is correct.
So they were in prison. Please
understand,
you all, as I'm looking right into the camera, our ancestors, they were literally in prison. Just like history, we've heard a lot of talk about how the Japanese Americans were interned during World War II in Arizona, and that was horrible. But nobody wants to talk about how black people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, were in internment camps back in 1921.
And sometimes for months at the time. But at the end there, we have to talk about how what these black people did in spite of all of that.
Yes.
They managed to rebuild that community. So much so that Tulsa actually did not peak in the early 20s. It actually peaked in the 40s and 50s as one of the top African-American business centers in these United States. You see, now I'm not saying this to minimize what happened at the internment camps and all of that, but see, too often we let the story stop there. And what does that do to the psyche of our youth?
I love it. And as a matter of fact, let me just, I apologize, but the reason I brought up the internment camp and the message that I'm hoping that people get out of this is that in spite of all the injustice, after being literally
that's all I'm saying,
bombed, I mean, private planes, and none of these companies, who are the companies that own these private planes that had turpentine bombs that were dropped on houses and businesses and churches? And in spite of all of that, being murdered, shot, and drugged behind cars and trucks on the street, and then being placed in internment camps, in prison, and in spite of all living in tent cities for half a year, and in spite of that, not only did they build back, they built back bigger and better.
That is correct.
I mean, I think
this is what our young people need to understand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Butler.
No, I was just going to say, I think that was one of the things that I thought was important, was just, it was who came to help with the process of rebuilding. I think so often we miss the fact that Tulsa had a library, right? The fact that Buck Colbert Franklin is a lawyer who sets up a tent and tells people, whatever you got, build wherever you are. I don't care what it is. Like, just just start there. And then we will draft up the documents to help the legal documents you need to make claim to the land you're on. So I think that the thing is that Tulsa demonstrates to us is what happens when we make use of and make room for all people, like all talent, right? The
Yes.
fact that the story gets written because these people are journalists, that people are photographers, right? Like that it's everybody documenting this process and documenting and being able to take all of their talent to put them to work, which is where I think sometimes we miss the mark. We just rely on, or we're like, oh, we don't need you, or we don't need you. But I think something about Tulsa demonstrates people who, organizations too, right? Because I think people really give Marcus Garvey a bad rap in the UNIA. He doesn't get the best of rap, but to think that he was like, I want to invest in, I don't want to just build a ship to send people back to Africa, but I also want to invest in right here,
Yes.
and rebuild these communities. And so I think that's also the key is coming around that part.
I'm down with
Is a part that I think we often miss.
Yeah, I'm
And
down
I
with
have to
the Pan Africanism. Dr. Fordham, go ahead and make your point. And before we run out of time, toss it to Dr. Butler. We were talking about some of these new shows, and even though I think Professor Fordham has a great quote, and paraphrasing, he'll get it right. He said, like, the two worst places to get history is Hollywood and the
Hollywood and the
internet. So I want you, Dr. Butler, especially being a dean at a college with African history and culture. I want you to just give us your take on the influence of Hollywood. Maybe it may have been in some positive way. Whatever your take is in terms of the TV shows that are really popular in this moment we're in now, which was, of course, a Watchmen that's not running again, and
Right.
and the other show. So go ahead.
And Lovecraft Country.
Yeah,
So
Lovecraft
I mean,
Country.
I think it was just fascinating that one of the executive directors and producers, Nicole Cassell, says she hadn't heard about the Tulsa massacre, right, the riots, until she read the script for Watchmen, right? And so I think there's something to be said for the fact that it's not always about Hollywood doesn't always get it right, but what it can do is pique an interest, and it makes you ask the questions, which is something that Professor Fordham talked about last week, which was cross-reference. So did this part really happen? Did this part really happen? In Lovecraft Country, they find the person, horse, peg leg Taylor. Is that correct? Did I get his name right?
correct.
That he's in the book of he's in the book of names in Lovecraft Country, right? Or that they have to go back to Tulsa. So you have no choice but to say, okay, which parts of this is real, which makes you have to watch, right? To gauge that. And I think that that's the part. If we look at it as it's not the end all be all, but it is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's your responsibility to now go read the books. Go talk to the historians and figure out what's true from what's not, or even go back to the artifacts. That's what archives are for. Avery is an archive. We don't have a Tulsa archive, but I think it's a stop that we miss to say that you can go into the archives and dig and see so whatever firsthand, whatever primary sources are still available to you to make sense of what's real from what's not.
I love that, Dr.
So,
Butler. Before we run out of time, before I lose you all's live shot, I want to give you each a minute, and hopefully they don't cut me off. So I want to end on, some may call this a provocative question, but I think it's important. I want each of you all to give us your assessment and opinion. How do we, as Black people, how do we make sure that Tulsa doesn't happen 100 years later?
Very simple. First of all, we study history for two reasons. Number one, to build upon the success of the past and to avoid the mistakes of it for the future. So that shows us the value in not believing myths of disunity and that sort of thing. And ironically, Buck Franklin's son was one of the great people who did a lot to dispel a lot of that mythology, because Buck Franklin's son was the great Dr. John Hope Franklin, the legendary Black historian who brought a lot of this history out into the open. And I met him on a number of occasions and learned a lot of wisdom from him. And John Hope Franklin, their grandson, is John W. Franklin, who is a historian himself. And I met him and his wife Karen when they came to Charleston a few years ago and gave them some of my books. So they're keeping that legacy going on in that family. And I think that that is such a wonderful example of what we can do with our families today. And if you didn't have a family that had that great legacy, you can start one from yourself and give it to your children, nieces, and nephews.
I love it. Dr. Butler, what your
I
same
agree.
question to you.
I mean, I think the thing is studying history for that reason, and it's also about documenting. So the main reason we know about Tulsa today is because somebody took the time to do the research, right? There's people who've interviewed the survivors, and we use those oral histories to make sense. So right now, people got phones, people have iPads, people have all kinds of technology. Talk to people. It might be these riots and the race massacres that you're documenting, but you'll be shocked of some of the things that our living elders have seen and experienced and witnessed. And so to prevent it from happening again, one of the things is just trying to prevent the kind of erasure, because we know that it can easily be erased without our collective efforts to preserve. So that's my big thing is, we all have the materials and the tools. So just use them to kind of keep the history going, because history it never stops. It's always there for us.
Dr. Tamara Butler, thank you so much. Professor Damon Fordham. You guys want to give everybody your social media contact if they want to reach out to you or just follow some of your work?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. Look me up under my name, Damon L. Fordham. I post things like this often. And I have a YouTube channel called The American Storyteller where I discuss these things. And I do have one on Tulsa that deals with just about everything I've said here today.
Wow. Dr. Butler.
I'm not as fancy as Professor Fordham. I'm just on Twitter. And I am DEFYANTAM. So I'm Defiant Tam on Twitter. And also Black Girl Land on Twitter. So most of the stuff is interested in Black women, land, Black people and land. So that's what you'll find. And occasionally a commentary on whatever's going on in the world. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, you have a home now. You both have a home for commentary. You all are official members of the Geno Jones Show as contributors. I'm honored to have you. Dr. Butler, real quick, one question. The Avery Research Center, it's not open to the public, is it? It's just for students?
It's not open to the public. It's open to researchers. So that's what I tell people. If you make an appointment, go to our website, avery.cfc.edu. And make an appointment, and we'll have researchers come in. But hopefully in the fall, we'll reopen. But right now, no, we're not open.
Okay, beautiful. And of course, Professor Damon Fordham, you're a professor of history at Charleston Southern University. Thank you guys so much.
In the afternoon and at the Citadel in the mornings, and I also do a tour called Lost Stories of Black Charleston.
I love it. All right, well, listen, I'm just telling you all now, they are part of the family. They are going to be regular contributors if their time allows. You all have blessed not just me, but my viewers and everyone with the contributions you all have made. I cannot thank you all enough. Thank you so much for what you are doing and have done and continue to do and will do for the culture, as we say. Once again, Dr. Tamara Butler, she is the executive director for the Avery Research Center, African American History and Culture, and associate dean at the College of Charleston here in Charleston, South Carolina, and Professor Damon Fordham, professor of history at Charleston Southern University. I told y'all we was coming with that fire, that heat, and we brought it. Thank you all both. Man, I just love you guys so much. God bless you. And I'm looking forward to continuing having conversations like this on a regular basis with you both. You guys did a great job. Or in my Tony the Tiger voice, great. Look, that's just a silly comedian in me. So you guys are serious. Let me be the fool on the show. Thank you all so much. Oh, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did an awesome job. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. As always, God bless each and every one of you. God, most of all, thank you for letting me do the Geno Jones Show live right here on my YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Let me say it again. I don't think you all really understand. Say it with me. Like, share, and subscribe. And tell everybody you know, all your kinfolk, all your cousins, your co-workers, your church members, folks you don't even like. Tell them to subscribe to the Geno Jones Show right here on my YouTube channel. There you go. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, if you'd like for me to be a sponsor, if you would like to be a sponsor on the Geno Jones Show, I would be honored to have you. If you'd like to advertise right here on the Geno Jones Show on my YouTube channel, I would be honored to have you. if you are looking for the ultimate pitchman, I am the king of pitchmen. Holler at your boy. Leave me a message right here on my YouTube channel, or you can send me an email, Geno Jones Show. That would be Geno Jones Show at Gmail, all right? Geno Jones Show at Gmail. Thank you very much. I love you so much, each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. Mother, you know I love you more than life itself. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I told you we was bringing the heat and the fire. Professor Damon Fordham, thank you once again. Professor of History at Charleston Southern University. And Dr. Tamara Butler, Executive Director for the Avery Research Center of African American History and Culture and Associate Dean at the College of Charleston Libraries. Like I said, I love you. I really do. Tomorrow, Geno Jones Show, live, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 Central Time, 3:30 out on the West Coast. Until tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, once again, thank you so much for watching, and be blessed.
Subscribe and tune in to the next episode of The Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube.